They say it vanished in a single day and a single night. Imagine a vast empire, gleaming with marble palaces and golden statues, its harbors crowded with 1,000 ships, its streets alive with voices from every corner of the world. An island kingdom beyond imagination, rich with knowledge, power, and beauty. And then, silence. The sea rose, the ground shook, and the entire civilization was swallowed by the ocean. Atlantis, the city of legends, erased in an instant. But was this a memory of something real or a story meant to warn us? The only record we have comes from one man, Plato. Over 2,000 years ago, the philosopher wrote of a mighty island nation beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. He described a people more powerful than any empire known to Greece, a people who grew proud, greedy, and arrogant. The gods, he said, struck them down. And their world, their achievements, their glory, vanished into the deep. Yet even after 24 centuries, the question lingers like a ghost. Did Atlantis ever exist? Some say it was nothing more than a parable, a fable designed to teach a lesson. Plato's Republic imagined an ideal society, so perhaps Atlantis was the opposite, a warning of what happens when power corrupts. But others believe there is truth buried in the waves. A forgotten civilization lost to time, its ruins hidden beneath the ocean floor. Think of it, a place advanced beyond its era, so prosperous that its very memory haunts us. Was it a real city crushed by disaster like Pompeii? Or was it a shadow of memory, a distorted echo of a catastrophe so ancient that even the Greeks barely remembered it? The story has survived not because it was simple, but because it touched something in us. Deep inside, we are drawn to the idea of things lost. Lost lands, lost knowledge, lost glory. Atlantis is not just a city beneath the sea. It is a reflection of our fear, the fear that even the greatest achievements can vanish overnight. Plato gave us details that still spark debate. Rings of land and water, canals stretching through the city, temples covered in gold and silver. A mighty navy that reached across the world. And then destruction. But the mystery only begins there. If Plato invented the tale, why did he weave such precise geography, such vivid description? If he borrowed it from older sources, then where did those stories come from? Egypt? Mesopotamia? Or perhaps memories passed down from survivors of some forgotten disaster, thousands of years before? The sea keeps its secrets well. It buries cities, swallows coastlines, erases memory. And yet, when storms reveal ruins, when divers stumble on forgotten walls beneath the waves, our imagination stirs again. Could this be Atlantis? Could this be the place that Plato spoke of? This is where the journey begins, with a city that may never have existed and yet refuses to die. With a legend powerful enough to inspire explorers, dreamers, scientists, and believers across centuries. With a question that has no final answer. As we enter the story of Atlantis, keep this in mind. Every civilization, no matter how strong, no matter how advanced, believes it will endure forever. And yet history whispers a different truth. What if Atlantis was not just a legend? What if it was a mirror of us? And if it truly was swallowed by the sea in one night and one day, could the same happen again? If we want to understand Atlantis, we must return to the man who first told the story, Plato. Nearly 2,500 years ago, in the golden age of Athens, Plato sat down to write a pair of dialogues, works called Timaeus and Critias. To most readers, they seemed like philosophy, the kind of discussion he often staged between wise men and thinkers. But within those pages, Plato slipped in something unusual. A story, a memory, a warning. He told of a great island nation beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Today we call it the Strait of Gibraltar. He said this island was vast, larger than Libya and Asia combined, with fertile plains and mountains full of metals. At its heart stood a city perfectly designed, with rings of land and sea, canals, bridges, and harbors that dazzled the eye. It was ruled by kings descended from Poseidon himself. And it was rich, so rich that its palaces gleamed with silver and gold, its temples shone with ivory, and its walls flashed with metals the Greeks themselves had never seen. But Plato said Atlantis was not content. Its kings grew proud. Its people, once noble, became greedy. Their armies marched across Europe and Asia, seeking dominion over all. They seemed unstoppable, until they reached Athens. There, according to Plato, the Athenians stood their ground, defied the invaders, and sent them retreating. And then came the end. In a single day and night, Plato wrote, earthquakes shook the earth, floods rose, and Atlantis sank beneath the waves, disappearing forever. Why did Plato tell this story? Some say it was allegory, pure and simple, a parable warning Athens not to fall to pride and corruption. After all, he wrote these dialogues not long after the Peloponnesian War, when Athens itself had risen to power, overreached, and been humbled by Sparta. Was Atlantis simply a mirror? A myth crafted to teach that no empire, no matter how glorious, could escape the laws of fate? But there is a problem with that explanation. Plato gave too many details. He described geography, measurements, mountains, rivers, even the kinds of crops that grew there. He said this story was not his invention, but came from an older source. From Solon, the famous Greek lawmaker who had traveled to Egypt 2 centuries earlier. According to Plato, Solon met Egyptian priests who told him of a mighty island kingdom that had vanished thousands of years before. These priests, he claimed, preserved knowledge of floods and disasters that destroyed civilizations long before Greek history even began. Solon carried that tale back to Greece, but he never finished recording it. It was left to Plato generations later to write it down. So what do we make of this? Was Plato simply inventing a history to give his philosophy weight? Or was he passing along fragments of a memory, distorted but real? This is where the story begins to blur the line between myth and history. Think of it like a game of whispers stretched across millennia. A story told in Egypt, passed to Solon, retold to Plato, copied by scribes, preserved by monks, translated and retranslated. With each step, details shift, words change. But the core remains, a city and empire destroyed in a single day and night. And yet, no other Greek historian of the time mentioned Atlantis. Not Herodotus, who traveled widely and recorded wonders. Not Thucydides, who chronicled the wars of Athens. To them, the world was vast, mysterious, but Atlantis was silent. Only Plato spoke its name. That silence has haunted the story ever since. If Plato invented Atlantis, then it is simply one of history's most enduring myths. But if he preserved something older, something whispered by the priests of Egypt, then Atlantis could be more than a tale. Could be memory. A record of a civilization erased by disaster. We must remember, history is fragile. The world before written records is a blur. Oral traditions carry truths mixed with legend. A flood remembered in Mesopotamia becomes the tale of Noah. A city swallowed by waves in Greece becomes the myth of Helike. Catastrophe echoes across generations until it hardens into myth. Could Atlantis be the same? The Egyptians themselves told stories of floods and cycles of destruction. They believed history was not a straight line, but a repeating circle. Worlds rose, worlds fell. Perhaps in their temples, when they told Solon of Atlantis, they were passing down one of these cycles, a memory of a kingdom lost. But we are left with questions. Did Plato mean for us to search for Atlantis as a real place? Or was he smiling as he wrote, knowing readers would debate it for millennia? Plato died before finishing Critias. The story of Atlantis cuts off mid-sentence as if frozen in time. We are left with fragments, half a tale, a mystery never completed. Some see this as evidence it was allegory. Others see it as proof that the full truth, the real secrets of Atlantis, were lost even then. And so, across history, scholars argued, was Atlantis myth, history, or both? The story passed from age to age, from monks in candlelit rooms to Renaissance explorers who dreamed of lost continents. And with each generation, Atlantis was reborn, reshaped to fit the hopes and fears of the time. But in the beginning it was Plato. One man, two dialogues, a story of an empire drowned in pride and sea. Was he a philosopher cloaking moral lessons in myth? Or was he the last link in a chain of memory that stretched back to a real world now gone? That is the puzzle. And the further we look into it, the deeper the mystery grows. Because if Plato preserved truth, even fragments, then Atlantis was not just a story. It was a warning carved in words meant for us. A warning that no empire, no matter how mighty, is safe from the weight of time and the wrath of nature. And yet, the question lingers: was Atlantis a parable? Or a memory of something we lost? The story of Atlantis did not end with Plato. In fact, one could say that the moment he wrote it down, its life truly began. For centuries, the tale lingered quietly in manuscripts, copied by monks, whispered in lecture halls, treated more as philosophy than history. But then came a new age, an age of sails and maps, of bold explorers pushing beyond the edges of the known world. The Renaissance breathed life back into forgotten texts. Scholars dusted off Plato's words, and for the first time in 1,000 years, people began to wonder, what if Atlantis was real? The timing was no accident. Europe was looking outward. Columbus had crossed the Atlantic, and suddenly a whole new world lay open, vast and uncharted. To many it seemed obvious, Atlantis must have been out there, across the ocean. Perhaps it was the Americas themselves, a remnant of the sunken empire, newly rediscovered. Writers of the 16th century embraced this vision. Maps were drawn showing Atlantis as a halfway point between Europe and the New World. Poets and philosophers imagined golden cities waiting to be found. Atlantis was no longer just Plato's parable. It was a beacon, a treasure to be hunted. But where was it? Some claimed the Azores, those lonely islands in the Atlantic, were the mountain peaks of the lost continent. Others looked to the Caribbean, where the ruins of the Maya and Aztecs seemed to echo Plato's descriptions of great civilizations destroyed by catastrophe. The jungles of Central America, thick with pyramids swallowed by vines, looked to European eyes like the footprints of Atlantis itself. The story grew wilder with each retelling. Francis Bacon, the English philosopher, even wrote a book called The New Atlantis, imagining an advanced island society dedicated to knowledge and discovery. To him, Atlantis was not a cautionary tale but a dream, a blueprint for what human progress might become. But dreams and discoveries are not the same. As explorers charted more of the globe, the simple idea of a lost continent in the middle of the Atlantic began to strain. Where was the evidence? Where were the ruins, the artifacts, the proof? The ocean floor remained silent. Still, Atlantis refused to die. In the 18th and 19th centuries, as archaeology bloomed and scholars dug into the sands of Egypt and Mesopotamia, the story of Atlantis found new fuel. The ruins of Troy had been uncovered, once thought to be purely mythical. If Troy could be real, why not Atlantis? Think of that for a moment. For centuries, Troy had been dismissed as legend, a poetic backdrop for Homer's epics. And yet, in the 1800s, Heinrich Schliemann, armed with little more than determination in Homer's verses, uncovered its walls in Turkey. Overnight, a myth became history. Atlantis believers asked, why couldn't the same happen for Plato's tale? This hope surged in the late 19th century, especially with a man named Ignatius Donnelly. A congressman, a writer, and a dreamer, Donnelly published Atlantis, the Antediluvian World in 1882. His book electrified the public. Donnelly argued that Atlantis was not just real but the source of all civilization. According to him, the pyramids of Egypt, the temples of the Maya, even the myths of gods and floods, all of them could be traced back to Atlantis. He painted the lost continent as humanity's cradle, the mother culture that spread knowledge across the world. It was an intoxicating idea. His book sold widely, and for decades, Atlantis fever gripped the imagination. Suddenly, every strange ruin, every unexplained artifact, was linked to the lost city. Mystics claimed to channel Atlantean wisdom. Writers filled shelves with theories, blending science with speculation. But there was a danger. Atlantis became a mirror, reflecting not only human hopes but also human fears. Pseudoscience began to creep in. Some used Atlantis to argue that certain races or cultures were descended from the lost empire, twisting myth into dangerous ideology. By the early 20th century, even fringe political movements claimed Atlantis as proof of their superiority. The legend had been warped, reshaped to serve darker ends. And yet, beyond the noise, serious questions remained. Could there have been a great civilization lost to the sea? Could a memory of disaster survive across millennia, preserved in Plato's tale? Modern science tried to answer. Geologists pointed to real events: earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, floods. The eruption of Thera, also called Santorini, around 1600 years before Christ, destroyed a powerful Bronze Age society and sent tsunamis crashing across the Aegean. Could this have inspired the tale? Others suggested Helike, a Greek city swallowed by the sea in Plato's own lifetime, might have been a model. The parallels were striking. A proud city destroyed overnight, remembered by survivors. Could Plato have taken Helike's tragedy and magnified it into the legend of Atlantis? Theories multiplied. Some placed Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean, others in the Mediterranean, the Caribbean, even Antarctica. Each new discovery of ruins or lost cities seemed to fuel the fire. But each time certainty slipped away. It is almost as if Atlantis itself does not want to be found. For every claim, a counterclaim arises. For every map drawn, another is torn apart. Atlantis remains like a phantom on the horizon, always visible, never reachable. And yet, this chase reveals something deeper. The search for Atlantis is not only about a city. It is about us. About our longing for origin, for connection to a time when humans walked closer to gods, when the world was both richer and more mysterious. That longing has never gone away. From Renaissance explorers to 19th century dreamers, from archaeologists to modern-day divers scanning the ocean floor with sonar, the search continues. Each generation pours its own hopes into Plato's story. Each sees what it wants to see. But the truth, if there is one, remains hidden. Beneath the waves, beneath the centuries. And so, the search carries on. Not because we are certain Atlantis exists, but because the possibility that it might exist keeps us looking. The modern world was supposed to have ended the mystery of Atlantis. Satellites orbit above us. Submarines dive to the deepest trenches, and computers map the ocean floor with beams of light. We know more about the cosmos than ever before. And yet, the ocean still keeps its secrets. More than 2/3 of our planet is covered by water, and yet, by some estimates, we have explored less than 5% of the seafloor. Imagine that: vast mountain ranges, valleys deeper than the Grand Canyon, plains larger than continents, all lying in silence beneath the waves, unseen. The Earth is still in many ways a stranger to us. And in that unknown space, Atlantis still hides. The 20th century brought a new kind of search. No longer was it just dreamers and mystics. Now scientists, geologists, and oceanographers joined the chase. The question shifted. Could Plato's story hold even a grain of truth, buried inside the layers of myth? Let's begin with the eruption of Thera, the island of Santorini. 16 centuries before the birth of Christ, a massive volcano tore the island apart. The eruption was one of the most violent in recorded history, sending ash across the Mediterranean, blotting out the sun, and unleashing tsunamis that devastated the Minoan civilization on Crete. The Minoans were a great maritime power, advanced in art, trade, and architecture. And then, almost overnight, they were broken. To many scholars, this disaster feels eerily like Plato's tale, a proud island civilization destroyed by fire, water, and the wrath of nature. Could Atlantis simply have been a memory of Thera's eruption, passed down and transformed into legend? Others point to the city of Helike. In Plato's own lifetime, Helike was swallowed by the sea after an earthquake. Survivors watched their homes vanish beneath the waves. The story of Helike was told for centuries afterward. Plato surely knew it. Was Atlantis simply Helike, magnified and moralized into a parable about hubris? And yet, these explanations, while convincing, do not satisfy everyone. Because there are anomalies, strange puzzles that keep the mystery alive. Consider the Bimini Road, discovered in the Bahamas in 1968. A series of massive stone blocks lie beneath the water, aligned in a way that suggests a road or wall. To believers, it was proof of a sunken city. To skeptics, it was simply natural limestone fractured into neat patterns by the sea. The debate rages to this day. Or take Yonaguni, off the coast of Japan. Divers discovered vast stone formations underwater. Terraces, steps, pillars. Some insist these are the remains of a forgotten civilization drowned by rising seas at the end of the last ice age. Others argue it is nothing more than a natural formation shaped by erosion. Once again, the line between nature and design blurs. But even science admits one thing: the ocean has swallowed cities before. We know this. In the Bay of Alexandria, divers have found the ruins of ancient temples and palaces, once thought lost. Along the coast of India, entire towns lie beneath the waves, reminders of how fragile human settlements are against rising seas. Even in Greece, near Pavlopetri, archaeologists discovered a sunken city over 5,000 years old. Streets, houses, courtyards still visible beneath the water. These are not myths. These are facts. The ocean does, in truth, hide the ruins of our past. And so, the possibility of Atlantis, while elusive, never fully dies. In recent decades, technology has carried the search deeper. Sonar scanning maps the seabed with precision. Satellites measure tiny changes in sea level and coastline. Underwater robots glide through the darkness, filming landscapes no human eyes have seen. Each discovery, each new map, adds to our knowledge. And yet, the mystery remains. Some scientists now ask a different question. What if Atlantis was never a single place at all? What if Plato's story was not about one city, but a memory of many? Throughout prehistory, sea levels rose dramatically. At the end of the Ice Age, as glaciers melted, entire coastlines were swallowed. Millions of square miles of land vanished beneath the ocean. Imagine the trauma. Imagine communities watching their villages disappear, generation after generation, forced to flee inland. These were floods on a scale almost unimaginable, walls of water devouring the world. Could these ancient memories, passed through countless stories, have merged into the single myth we call Atlantis? It is possible. And if so, Atlantis is not just a place. It is every place lost to the sea. Still, the hunger for something specific endures. The idea of a single city, shining, advanced, proud, keeps us searching. Because Atlantis is more than ruins. It is the promise of a key to understanding our origins, to rewriting the story of humanity. If we could find Atlantis, perhaps we would find proof of a civilization older, wiser, more advanced than we dare imagine. This is why the search does not end. Each year, expeditions set out. Some scan the Atlantic. Others probe the Mediterranean. Some even explore Antarctica, imagining that beneath its ice lies the forgotten heart of Plato's empire. Most return empty-handed. And yet each attempt deepens the legend. Because in the end, Atlantis lives not in stones or maps but in imagination. It is the ultimate riddle, a story that adapts with time. To some, it is a cautionary tale about pride. To others, a memory of real catastrophe. To dreamers, it is a promise of hidden greatness. To scientists, it is a puzzle worth chasing because the chase itself reveals how little we know of our own past. And so, the ocean waits, silent, unmoved, guarding its secrets. Atlantis has not yet been found. Perhaps it never will be. But as long as mystery exists, as long as we look at the sea and wonder, Atlantis will remain alive. Alive in our questions. Alive in our fears. Alive in our hope that somewhere beneath the waves lies a truth that could change everything. Long after Plato, the words of Atlantis did not fade. They rippled outward, like waves moving from a stone dropped into a lake. Each generation retold the story, reshaping it until Atlantis became more than a city. It became a mirror. Whatever people longed for, whatever they feared, they saw reflected in Atlantis. During the Renaissance, Europe rediscovered the works of ancient Greece. Plato's dialogues were studied not just as philosophy but as hints of hidden knowledge. Scholars whispered that perhaps the old world had once known a civilization greater than any alive today. In dusty libraries, maps were redrawn, legends cross-checked, and the idea of Atlantis gained a new breath of life. Writers began to place Atlantis wherever mystery lingered. Some imagined it in the Atlantic Ocean, its very name echoing the word Atlantis. Others whispered it lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, in lands unseen, perhaps even in the new worlds being uncovered by explorers. When Columbus set sail, there were those who thought he might stumble not just upon unknown continents, but upon the lost empire of Plato himself. As the age of exploration expanded the edges of maps, Atlantis became a convenient explanation for the unknown. Strange ruins in the Americas? Perhaps they were Atlantean. Advanced cultures like the Maya or Inca. Maybe they were descendants of that ancient, drowned world. In this way, Atlantis seeped into the European imagination as a bridge between myth and the great unknown. But Atlantis was not only a symbol of discovery, it was also a warning. For in Plato's story, the city is destroyed not by chance but by pride. Atlantis grew powerful, greedy, and corrupt. Its people, once noble, fell into arrogance. And so, the gods, or fate itself, erased them. This message resonated with moralists, preachers, and philosophers alike. They saw Atlantis as proof that no empire, no matter how mighty, could last forever if it forgot humility. Rome fell. Babylon fell. Why not Atlantis? Why not any empire? In the 17th century, the English philosopher Francis Bacon reimagined Atlantis in his book The New Atlantis. But his vision was not one of destruction. It was a dream. A dream of a society guided by knowledge, science, and discovery. In Bacon's Atlantis, wisdom was preserved, not punished. Laboratories, libraries, and great halls of learning filled his vision. For Bacon, Atlantis was not a ruin. It was a blueprint for a better world. This duality, Atlantis as both a warning and a promise, continued to grow. By the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution transformed the way people thought about progress. Machines roared, cities grew, and human ambition seemed unstoppable. In this climate, the myth of Atlantis thrived once more. Writers and mystics suggested that Atlantis was not only real but advanced far beyond anything modern society had achieved. Some claimed the Atlanteans had mastered technology we still cannot replicate: crystal energy, flying machines, even weapons that could harness the power of nature itself. To a world intoxicated with progress, these stories felt strangely believable. If humanity could invent steam engines, telegraphs, and electricity in a single century, why couldn't a forgotten people have done the same thousands of years ago? Then came Helena Blavatsky, a Russian mystic of the late 19th century. She wove Atlantis into her vast spiritual philosophy, teaching that the Atlanteans were not only advanced but also a distinct race in the great cycle of human evolution. To her followers, Atlantis was more than a city. It was a stage in the destiny of mankind. Others, like Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, claimed to enter trances where they saw visions of Atlantis. He prophesied that fragments of the city would one day rise again, perhaps in the Bahamas, and that Atlantean knowledge would return to guide humanity. Of course, science remained skeptical. Archaeologists dismissed these claims, pointing to the lack of evidence. But skepticism could not stop fascination. Atlantis was no longer just a footnote in Plato's dialogues. It had become a cultural force. And then came the 20th century when Atlantis leapt from books into cinema. Filmmakers brought it to life with glittering cities beneath the waves, filled with strange machines and forgotten kings. Comics, novels, and adventure stories all embraced Atlantis as the ultimate lost world. To storytellers, it was a canvas of infinite possibility, a place where anything could be imagined. Think about it, when we dream of a city beneath the sea, gleaming with towers and lights, we are really dreaming of Atlantis. When we picture a ruin swallowed by the ocean, we are imagining Atlantis. It has become shorthand for mystery itself. Even today, Atlantis appears everywhere. In movies, video games, and television, it is reborn again and again. Sometimes it is a utopia, a paradise of wisdom and peace. Sometimes it is a dystopia, a fallen empire corrupted by its own power. It adapts, it changes, but it never dies. Why does this story endure? Perhaps because it speaks to something timeless in us. On one hand, Atlantis feeds our hunger for discovery. It whispers that there is still something left to find, something grand and world-changing waiting just beyond reach. On the other hand, it warns us. It reminds us that power without humility leads to ruin. In Atlantis, we see both our greatest hopes and our darkest fears. The myth is not merely old words on a page. It is alive, pulsing through our culture, reshaped by every era. And with each retelling, the line between truth and imagination blurs a little more. And so, we are left with a question. If a story can endure for over 2,000 years, if it can inspire philosophers, explorers, mystics, and filmmakers alike, could there be something real behind it? Some seed of truth buried deep, waiting for us to uncover? The search for that truth still continues. And it will take us next into the strangest territory of all. The possibility that Atlantis was not just part of Earth's history, but something far beyond. The story of Atlantis should have ended with Plato. A parable. A warning. Nothing more. But as centuries passed, imagination pulled it further from philosophy and closer to legend. And legend, once set free, is not so easily contained. Atlantis became not only a city lost to the waves, but a mystery so deep it could contain almost anything. By the 19th and 20th centuries, as science advanced, so did speculation. The idea of Atlantis was no longer about a single island. It became a canvas on which people painted their boldest theories, some rooted in history, others in realms far beyond. One of the most enduring claims is that the Atlanteans possessed technology greater than our own. Not just advanced ships or weapons, but machines capable of drawing power from the earth itself. Crystal energy, some said, was their lifeblood. Vast glowing stones, harnessing natural forces the way we use electricity. In these stories, Atlantis hums with power, towers glowing like modern skyscrapers, vehicles soaring through the sky, and weapons that could shake the earth itself. How did this idea take hold? Partly it was a reflection of its time. As humanity discovered electricity, as light bulbs banished the dark and engines roared to life, it seemed plausible that a forgotten people might have done the same long ago. If we could leap forward so fast, why couldn't they? But the theories did not stop with technology. Some began to wonder if Atlantis was not even of this earth. Could it have been seeded by beings from the stars? Ancient astronaut theorists suggest that the Atlanteans were either guided by extraterrestrials or were themselves not entirely human. Strange, isn't it? But for some, it explains the mystery. If Atlantis had power far beyond its time, perhaps it was because its roots lay not in Greece or Africa, but in the heavens. These claims, though lacking evidence, grew popular because they gave Atlantis an almost cosmic importance. It was no longer just a forgotten city. It was the missing chapter of human history. A place where gods walked with mortals. A cradle of impossible knowledge. Then came Edgar Cayce, the so-called sleeping prophet. In the early 20th century, while in trance, Cayce claimed to see visions of Atlantis. He described not only its destruction but its survival. According to him, fragments of the empire remained, and the Atlantean spirit would rise again in our time. He even predicted that remnants of Atlantis would emerge in the Bahamas, near Bimini. To his followers, this was not myth. It was prophecy. Even today, believers point to unusual rock formations in the waters near the Bahamas, the so-called Bimini Road, as proof. Large rectangular stones, lying in straight lines beneath the waves. Are they natural? Most geologists say yes. But to the dreamers, they are the remnants of streets, built by a lost civilization thousands of years ago. The mystery deepened in the 20th century as divers and explorers claimed to see ruins beneath the sea off the coasts of Cuba, Japan, and India. Vast stone structures, strange formations, shapes that looked too deliberate to be natural. Photographs circulated. Stories spread. For some, these discoveries were undeniable proof that the Earth still holds forgotten chapters. But Atlantis also began to merge with other mysteries. Was it connected to the pyramids of Egypt, whose construction still raises questions? Were the great stone heads of Easter Island reminders of Atlantean voyagers? Did the myths of Lemuria in the Pacific and Mu in the Indian Ocean all come from the same lost source? To fringe theorists, Atlantis was the root of all great mysteries. A single civilization that spread knowledge across the globe before vanishing into the sea. And then came perhaps the wildest theory of all, that Atlantis was not just a city, not just an empire, but an entire world, a dimension, a civilization that slipped not only beneath the waves but out of reality itself. In this view, Atlantis did not sink, it shifted, vanished, hidden in another plane of existence waiting to return. Of course, mainstream science rejects these claims. Archaeologists remind us that no evidence has ever proven Atlantis existed. The ruins, they argue, are natural. The myths are just myths. The prophecies were never fulfilled. But still, people search. Why? Because the story of Atlantis does something science rarely can. It ignites the imagination. It makes us wonder, what if? What if there really was a civilization more advanced than we dream? What if the great disasters of our past erased knowledge we can barely imagine? What if Atlantis is the missing link in our history? And so the legend grows. Fueled by hope, by mystery, by the human refusal to accept that all has been discovered. But here lies the twist. For if Atlantis was real, if fragments of it still linger in ruins beneath the sea, then perhaps we are closer to rediscovering it than ever before. The modern age has tools Plato could never have imagined. Satellites scan the ocean floor. Submarines probe the deep. Artificial intelligence maps what was once invisible. The oceans are vast, yes, but they are no longer beyond our reach. So the question remains, if Atlantis is down there, hidden under the waves, will we finally see it in our lifetime? Or is it destined to remain forever a story, forever a dream? The answer may lie not in the past, but in the very future of exploration. And that is where our story now leads, into the search for Atlantis in the modern world. The legend of Atlantis might be ancient, but the hunt for it is anything but old. In fact, the modern search has only grown sharper, stronger, and more determined. If Plato's words were the spark, then our technology has become the fire. And today, with satellites above us and submarines below, humanity is closer than ever to answering the question, was Atlantis real, or just a myth? It begins with the oceans themselves. For centuries, the sea has been a blind spot in our understanding. We mapped mountains, we charted deserts, we explored jungles, but the oceans remained a great, silent mystery. Even now, more than 80% of the ocean floor is unmapped. Think about that. Most of our own planet still lies hidden, unseen beneath the waves. It is as though Earth carries its greatest secrets under a cloak of salt water. Into this darkness stepped the dreamers. Oceanographers, divers, explorers with one mission, to prove Plato right. One of the earliest breakthroughs came not from myth hunters, but from science itself. In the mid-20th century, sonar mapping revealed vast ridges and plateaus deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean. Some believed these were remnants of sunken continents. Suddenly, what was once only legend began to look like possibility. The most famous of these searches focused on the Azores, a group of volcanic islands far out in the Atlantic. Lying almost exactly where Plato described, the Azores became a magnet for those who believed Atlantis had been swallowed by the sea. Divers claimed to find stone roads, walls, even staircases beneath the water. Were these ruins? Or were they tricks of geology, carved not by human hands but by nature itself? The debate never stopped. And then came the Bimini discovery. In 1968, divers off the coast of the Bahamas stumbled across a strange underwater formation. Massive rectangular stones laid out in straight lines, stretching for hundreds of feet. To many this was proof. A road, a harbor, the remains of an Atlantean city. Newspapers spread the story, and suddenly, the lost city was alive again in the public imagination. Geologists argued it was a natural beach rock formation, fractured by erosion. But to believers, the Bimini Road was a doorway into the past. The search only grew louder in the 21st century. Now satellites scan the seas, capable of detecting shapes beneath the surface. In 2012, a team of researchers announced something extraordinary. What appeared to be giant geometric patterns off the coast of Cuba, 2,000 feet beneath the waves. Sonar images suggested pyramid-like structures and massive stone blocks arranged in strange, deliberate formations. Could this be Atlantis? The Cuban discovery electrified the world. True, it would rewrite history. But the depths were too extreme for easy exploration. and political barriers kept investigations limited. Photographs remain scarce, evidence remains thin, and the mystery lingers. But for many, the mere possibility was enough. Atlantis, they said, was there, waiting. Meanwhile, other searches reached across the globe. In the Mediterranean, near Spain, archaeologists uncovered circular patterns in the mudflats of Diana National Park. These rings matched, almost eerily, Plato's description of Atlantis as concentric circles of land and water. Could it be that Atlantis was not across the Atlantic at all, but right there in Europe's backyard? Excavations revealed evidence of a Bronze Age culture destroyed by flood. Some scholars argue it fits Plato's tale more closely than any other site. Yet doubts remain and the debate goes on. Modern technology has only deepened the hunt. Advanced sonar, satellite imaging, and underwater drones now reveal landscapes hidden for millennia. Entire valleys, mountains, and even sunken cities have been uncovered in recent years, proof that human history is far older and more complex than once believed. Off the coast of India, ruins more than 9,000 years old have been found beneath the waves near Dvarka. In Japan, at Yonaguni, strange stepped stone formations rise from the sea floor, resembling pyramids and temples. Are these natural, or are they evidence of civilizations erased by time and tide? Each discovery rekindles the fire. If forgotten cities can lie just beyond reach, then perhaps Plato's words were not invention but memory. Perhaps Atlantis is not lost forever, only waiting for the right eyes, the right machines to uncover it. But with every claim comes controversy. For each photograph of underwater ruins, skeptics point to geology. For every sonar scan of strange patterns, skeptics demand proof. Science thrives on evidence, and Atlantis has always danced just beyond its grasp. And yet, the ocean keeps its secrets well. Think of it like a locked library, its shelves filled with books of stone and coral, each one holding a story we have not yet read. We have only cracked open the first pages. Who knows what waits deeper? Some say the discovery of Atlantis would change everything. It would not just be proof of one city, but a sign that human civilization is far older, far more advanced, and far more fragile than we ever imagined. It would force us to reconsider not only history but the future. After all, if a great empire could vanish overnight, what does that say about us? But others warn that Atlantis should remain a mystery, that its power lies not in being found but in being chased, that the dream of Atlantis inspires us to push further, dive deeper, and imagine more than we otherwise would. So the search goes on. From the deep seas of the Atlantic to the coral reefs of the Bahamas, from the deserts of Spain to the cliffs of Japan, explorers continue to chase shadows. Each dive, each scan, each expedition carries the same question, echoing across the ages: is Atlantis real? Or is it only a mirror reflecting our deepest hopes and fears? And perhaps the most haunting thought of all is this: what if Atlantis is out there, waiting in the deep, and we are simply not ready to find it yet? The answer for now lies beneath the waves. Silent, hidden, watching. But in the next act, we will confront the heart of the matter. Not whether Atlantis existed, but why the idea of it refuses to die. Why, after thousands of years, the story still grips us. Why we, as human beings, need Atlantis. The ocean hides many mysteries, but perhaps the greatest mystery of Atlantis is not where it is, but why it will not leave us. For more than 2,000 years, the world has carried this story like a torch. Empires have risen and fallen, languages have changed, entire cultures have vanished. Yet the idea of Atlantis has never drowned. It drifts across time, generation to generation, untouched by the waves. What? The answer is not just about history. It is about us. About what it means to be human, to dream, to long for something greater than ourselves. When Plato first told the story, it was more than a tale of a sunken city. It was a warning, a mirror. He spoke of pride, of a civilization so powerful, so magnificent, that it forgot humility. He spoke of greed, of ambition that grew like a fire until it consumed everything. And he spoke of destruction, the moment when the gods, tired of arrogance, let the sea reclaim what man had built. Even now the story rings true. Every generation sees itself in Atlantis. Every age looks into that mirror. For the Athenians of Plato's time, it was a lesson about hubris. For the Romans, it was a reminder that no empire lasts forever. For explorers in the Renaissance, it was a promise that wonders still waited across the sea. And for us today, it is a whisper in the back of our minds, be careful. We too could fall. Atlantis has become more than a place. It is an idea. The idea of lost perfection. A memory we never had but feel in our bones. It is the ache for a golden age when humanity was wiser, braver, more united, an age we somehow lost but might one day recover. That is why so many cling to it. Atlantis is hope. Hope that we are not the first to dream big, to build cities that touch the sky. Hope that we belong to something ancient, something greater than the small slice of history we know. But Atlantis is also fear. Fear that no matter how high we climb, the sea is always waiting. Fear that the ground beneath us is never as steady as we think. Fear that all our skyscrapers, satellites, and glowing cities could vanish just as easily as Plato's tale, in a single day, in a single night. This duality, hope and fear, dream and warning, is what gives Atlantis its power. We need it because it reflects both sides of us. Our hunger to explore, to imagine, to discover, and our unease at how fragile we truly are. Think about the great myths of every culture. The Garden of Eden, Shambhala, El Dorado. All of them speak of paradise lost. A place of wonder and harmony that slipped from our grasp. Atlantis belongs to that family of myths, but with one crucial difference. It feels closer, more real, because Plato gave it details, names, geography. He wrote as if reporting, not inventing. And so Atlantis sits on the border between history and myth, never proven, never denied. That is where it gets its grip. And perhaps deep down we need it there. We do not want Atlantis to be found too easily because mystery is its heartbeat. We want to chase it, to search the waves, to wonder. If we discovered tomorrow that Atlantis was only a natural rock formation, the dream would die. But as long as the possibility survives, so does the magic. Atlantis is the story of human longing. Longing for answers, longing for meaning, longing for a world bigger than the one we know. It is a reminder that no matter how advanced we become, we are still storytellers, still wanderers, still creatures of wonder. But here is the twist. Sometimes the stories we cling to shape our reality. Sometimes belief itself creates discovery. Explorers set sail across the Atlantic because they believed in Atlantis. Scientists scan the ocean floor because they want Atlantis to exist. The myth pulls us forward, pushing us to uncover truths we might otherwise ignore. In chasing Atlantis, we often stumble upon real history, forgotten cities, lost civilizations, truths about ourselves. So perhaps it does not matter whether Atlantis was real in stone and mortar. Perhaps what matters is that it is real in us, in our imagination, in our questions, in our restless, unshakable drive to reach beyond the horizon. But here lies the greatest cliffhanger of all. What if the myth of Atlantis is not only a story of the past, but a prophecy of the future? What if Atlantis is not just a warning about what was lost, but a mirror of what could happen again? A whisper that one day our cities too could slip beneath the waves? And if that is true, are we ready? Because in the final act, we will step into the ultimate question. Not whether Atlantis existed, but whether we, here now, are destined to become the next Atlantis. The legend of Atlantis has followed us for more than 2,000 years. It has been a tale of pride and power, of loss and longing. But now, as we stand on the shores of our own uncertain future, the story of Atlantis is no longer ancient history. It is prophecy. Plato wrote of an empire that believed itself untouchable, that built wonders and marveled at its own brilliance, until nature itself rose against it. In a single day and night, the sea swallowed everything. To his students, it was a parable. To us, it is a mirror. For what do we see today when we look at our world? Cities that glitter at night like constellations. Towers that pierce the clouds. Networks that span the globe with light. A civilization more powerful than anything before it. But beneath the glow, cracks are showing. The ice is melting. The seas are rising. Storms grow fiercer. Heat grows heavier. And once again the water is coming. Every year we watch coastlines disappear. Islands shrink. Families flee the homes their ancestors built. Scientists warn that if the seas keep rising, entire cities will vanish. Miami, Jakarta, Venice, Alexandria. Places that once felt eternal could slip beneath the waves, just as Atlantis did. And the cruelest truth of all? It will not take the hand of angry gods. It will be us. Our own pride, our own hunger, our own unchecked fire burning through the earth. This is why the legend of Atlantis refuses to die. Because it is not only the story of what might have been lost long ago. It is the story of what we risk losing now. And yet, there is hope. Because unlike the Atlanteans, we still have time. Plato's city may have been too arrogant to listen to warning signs, but we do not have to be. We can read the writing on the wall, or rather, the waves against the shore. We can remember that every empire, no matter how powerful, is fragile. And we can choose to protect rather than consume. To build with humility, not with hubris. Atlantis is not just a cautionary tale. It is a challenge. It asks us, will we fall like they did, or will we learn? Will our children one day tell stories of New York or London or Shanghai the way we now whisper about Atlantis, cities lost to the sea? Or will they tell a different story, one where humanity faced the tide and refused to sink? The truth is, no one knows. The waves are rising, but so is our will to survive. The myth of Atlantis lingers because it is unfinished. Its ending is still unwritten, and now it belongs to us. So as we close this journey, remember, Atlantis is not only behind us, buried in the sea. Atlantis is ahead of us, waiting in the choices we make. The greatest mystery of all is not where Atlantis was, but whether we, in our pride and in our brilliance, will become the next Atlantis. And that question is one we will answer together.